Hello and welcome to the Single Girl's Guide to Life, your weekly guide to single life living in your 20s and 30s. I'm Chantelle the coach, a quarter life and confidence coach for women in their 20s and 30s that want to embrace that single life. They don't want to be worrying about finding someone, although that might be nice, but they really want to make the most of what's going on in their single life, and maybe they're a little bit worried or anxious to do things on their own, or they're not sure, or they feel lonely. And with the programs I have, with the information I want to share with you, and the Single Girls Club, which is growing every single day, we are becoming a collective of single women that want to embrace that singleness. We laugh at some of the dating things that come up, the things that give us the ick, but we try and embrace that single life. And in today's episode of the Single Girl's Guide to Life, I'm going to be talking about Christmas, because it is now November, Halloween has gone, and as we know is socially acceptable, once Halloween is out of the way, it is time for Christmas. And so things start to get very twinkly and pretty, but so too do all of those couple-like events. We get the mistletoe coming out as Christmas gets closer and closer, and we go from 1 minute of this like twinkly, beautiful loveliness and all snowy and wonderful about Christmas to this stark reminder of the fact that you're single at this time. And it can feel like it builds up to this point. It's not just Christmas Day that I'm going to be talking about, though I will mention it. There's also the build up. We have nearly 2 whole months of going through the Christmas period. And whilst you might date in that time, there's still an element of the fact that you don't know if you're going to find someone for Christmas. And there's the reality that you have to start planning for Christmas and considering that you're single. Even if you meet someone, you may or may not do something on Christmas Day like a walk, but you're going to have your plans and you should stick with those, because that's a very, very early relationship. It's probably a dating stage more than anything. And so you have to get through 2 months of couple-filled winter wonderland trips. You've got the romantic dinners in those outdoor snow globe things that became all trendy last year with all the pretty stuff around it that look great. I know you can do that with friends too, but there's the element of they look like they're designed to look really good for a proposal, which is then the next thing that comes up a lot at Christmas. We get a plethora of Christmas engagements, particularly on the day, but also just around that time. And I'll hold my hands up and apologise for being one of those people a couple of years ago when I was proposed to. I didn't necessarily say that Christmas was or wasn't something I would do, but I realised that I was part of that problem at one point to a degree, that adding to that. But it is something that happens. It's something that gets people in the mood for that romantic element, and thinking about a present in that sense goes on. And it can feel a bit like an attack because of how much and how often it happens in these next 2 months, all the different things that are going on. It happens all the time. Our friends get married, they become pregnant, you got pregnancy announcements potentially at Christmas too, not quite as prominent, but it's a good point to do a present with a card. And it's the element that it's all around you. It feels like it's happening everywhere, and you to a degree can't escape it, because people are sharing even more things on social media, doing things with their partner, and you can feel that loneliness, that fear of FOMO that is literally on your doorstep building. And then even on a kind of subtle level, comparably, you've got the element of coming together at Christmas with your family, which from the poll that was on the Instagram story that I ran on this, like, people are spending a lot of time with their families, and focusing on family time is just one of the ways that people manage Christmas. They focus on being with their loved ones in that sense, and that takes away from that loneliness. But even within that, there's the element that there can be lots of couples appearing. If you've got quite a big family, you've possibly got siblings, cousins and other family members or family friends who come along and bring their partner too, and they're like roughly your age. I mean, maybe they're even younger, and that makes us panic, doesn't it? When there's almost this age thing that as long as no one younger than me is doing it, then I'm probably on track and I'm okay. But the minute they do, it's like, oh God, what am I doing? And I need to sort my life out. And they come and they're talking weddings, babies, houses, anything like that. And it can be that kind of missing outness that you aren't there to mention those things, or they're just not as obvious. And so it can happen just subtly. And there's also the transition of when you were all friends with your friends. Hopefully you're still friends with them. When you were friends with your friends, you maybe did some things over the Christmas period. Maybe not on Christmas Day so much, though I have seen from the poll that a couple of people are spending it with friends. And so you end up spending Christmas with your family or maybe on your own. But during that Christmas period, you used to have some time for friends and catching up with people you hadn't maybe seen for a little while. But then as those friends have now started to develop their own partnerships, maybe even their own families where children are coming into it, they now want to focus on that. So it could be that they're going away to their partner's family for the Christmas period. So rather than just going for a day or two, they're going for that whole betwixtmas section. And that would be the bit when you maybe used to see them and catch up. Or they have children, and the magic of Christmas really sits with the children and doing the build up on Christmas Eve, and it changes. And that's fine. I completely respect different people's shifting transitions, but sometimes we're not that prepared for it. We don't always realize that that's going to happen. We don't necessarily see it happening. We don't think about it. And if you've seen any of my TikToks recently, you'll know that I don't think many people consider it, or consider what happens with friendships, and the idea of breaking up with friends to a degree is like a thing. But that focus will shift for other people. And if we don't know and think about it, then it can kind of blindside us a bit. We don't realise that it's about to happen. And that's when that loneliness, that realisation comes in. If you didn't realise it was going to happen, then it catches you off guard and you're like, oh my goodness. So the idea is to find ways to manage that, to go through Christmas being single, which isn't a problem, might I add, and trying to do it in a way that you can come out the other side still half smiling. And in my aim, it's to get you ready for 2022 so that you're not disheartened or demotivated through the Christmas period, but you're ready to tackle 2022 as the year of you. If you've seen, there's the journal out that you can grab and get yourself ready for 2022, and there's going to be an accountability group for that. But you're going to be wanting to get ready and not let Christmas take you down. And so getting through Christmas when you're single is vital. And this is why this is all happening, with that fear of missing out. Now, one of the first things that can really frustrate us around the Christmas time, and this comes up in lots of contexts, and I know I've mentioned it before, but this is when you're at a family party, and obviously at Christmas, you're potentially going to meet up with even more people that you don't see that often. And one of the pet peeves that comes up in our Single Girls Club Zoom calls is having to deal with queries regarding your love life or dating. And that person, classic uncle or aunt comment most of the time, that literally says, I can't believe you're still single. And you're like, thank you, great. Probably didn't need you to highlight that. I am, yes, still indeed single, and nor do I know why. But you get all these little phrases that come in, and it's awkward, because what do you say to that? It's repetitive, it's boring, and you just don't want to be talking about it again. Like, you've done it. We did this 6 months ago at the wedding, at someone's wedding. And so a little gem of wisdom that I got from Matthew Hussey's Impact Program was where he suggested a technique where you flip the conversation onto something you want to talk about and to move off of that topic. So, for example, if it was the question, how's all the dating going? Nice and general and open. Instead of just replying with not great or reeling off some terrible stories about people you've come across, or, you know, it being a sensitive topic that you actually don't want to talk about, acknowledge it with a very brief response so that person doesn't feel like you've just completely ignored them. But then change the conversation, make a statement about something that you want to talk about. So in this example, you could go, yeah, it's going all right, but I'm actually doing a lot with the house at the moment. I've been decorating the kitchen and I'm saving to renovate the bathroom. Just by doing that, you have acknowledged the dating, but you very quickly moved off of it. and you are now talking about potentially 2 other topics. That person has 2 clear opportunities, 2 things they can talk to you about. They can ask you, what have you done to your kitchen? Tell me about that. Or they can say, what plans have you got for your bathroom? Or if they really want to, they can start sharing their own stories of their own renovation. But you have shifted the topic from your dating life to your house projects. And whether they ask you about your house projects or bring in theirs, you have successfully moved off of that same mundane conversation that you're kind of over. So that's just one way to tackle that kind of element of Christmas. The next bit is, why is everyone a couple? So I've touched on this earlier, the idea that everybody's out on those romantic dates. It's the build-up of, we're going to be spending it together, we're going to possibly go on some romantic trips. But when I was considering this element, I came across Cosmopolitan's 14 Reasons Why Being Single at Christmas is actually great. And I will link it so that you can have a look and go through it. But one of the things that I loved when I came across it, and it reminded me of, was that you don't have to worry about what you're doing. And that's quite general. Like, you don't have to worry about where you're spending your Christmas or your Christmas period time, like Boxing Day. It's not like we have to do one day at yours and one day at mine. You can spend it wherever you want to spend it. As well as that, you don't have to think about anybody else. So you're not thinking about your partner, you're not thinking about their family, and you aren't having to buy presents for them all. There's so much that we think we want because of what it looks like and the pluses. And I know that some of you do really want that and would love it to happen. But at the same time, every situation comes with a trade-off. And some of you will probably be screaming at this going, but I want to have the argument about where we spend Christmas. Like, I want that difference. And it is a case of, to a degree, the grass is greener element, because, if I had that, then it wouldn't be like that. But you have to remember the times, if you've had that opportunity and been in a long-term relationship where you do have to, what feels like, run about at Christmas. Because at Christmas, in my scenario, for example, you are also managing split families too. So when I was with my ex, we had to come up with ways to see 3 different families. And even then, on his side, whilst he didn't have a split family, they were quite family orientated, and you'd have Christmas dinner, but then you'd also have the big thing where everybody came together, and my family's quite small and it could be quite daunting when it built up. There is so much that comes with that coupleness that whilst it looks great to do Winter Wonderland, there is still compromise. And it's all the things that I've spoken about in previous episodes. Episode number 1, 8 Reasons Why It's Great Being Single, is that idea that you don't have to think about anyone. And I acknowledge that some people do want that, and the idea of that doesn't necessarily take all of the pain away from the fact that you would like to be in a relationship and you would like to come up with ways that you're going to see everybody over Christmas. But it's one of those that, whilst you're in the scenario, it is worth reminding yourself about that there are pluses. And I'll link the 14 reasons so you can read about the rest of them that Cosmo came up. I'm not literally going to recycle everything, but I think it's such an important one that you forget. You don't have to come up with all the presents you're buying. You don't have to buy the presents for him to give to them because he hasn't done it himself. You don't have to think about the impression you're making if it's an early stage relationship and you haven't actually met them that much. There's so much that goes within that relationship, apart from which you don't want an argument on Christmas Day. And also you're dating him, not the family, and it can be quite an interesting transition to have to start meeting everyone. So whilst it's something that we might desire, it's definitely worth realising that that's a pro for being single at Christmas. Which brings me on to the next point, which is that this is your Christmas too. I think this is going to be my biggest message through this podcast episode, because Christmas is full of tradition. Christmas tends to be, I believe, from my understanding, a very similar setup for each person and their family every year. It doesn't tend to differ that much. You end up going to someone's house probably for food, unless you go out. That's actually my favourite. I've only ever done it twice, I think. But the idea that you go to someone's house, they cook dinner, and then you either stay there for the evening, and maybe it involves games, and sometimes that day is flipped depending on your family, or you end up having to move somewhere else because you might have had food at home, but then you're going to see other family to celebrate the kind of evening. But within this and being single, particularly if you live alone as well, there's an element that if you are involved in Christmas of any sort, you get a choice about what you do. And whilst there has been tradition and things that have always been done that are the same, you should consider this an opportunity where you could do something different and could try some new things out. So this is starting to look a little bit more towards the Christmas Day, or the very close period of time where everyone is off. So we're talking Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and because of the way it falls this year, you actually get the Monday and the Tuesday off, because Christmas Day is Saturday and Boxing Day is Sunday. So you actually then, everyone bar some industries, would get the Monday and the Tuesday off too. So we've now got that whole period of time of what could be called Christmas. And it's worth remembering that this is your Christmas too. You can choose where you wake up on Christmas Day if you don't live at home. But you can choose to go back to your parents or another family member if you so wish, or you can choose to wake up on your own. You can go to theirs for a Christmas dinner, or you might find that you actually want to spend it alone and you want to try out what it's like to be alone for at least some of Christmas Day. You might never have done a Christmas Day walk. My family aren't into that. They don't do that. I like walking, and Christmas Day walk sounds great to me, and I know other families and groups that do it. So it's not just this idea that couples might do it, it's looking at different family traditions or just different Christmas events that people do and the ways they do them, and kind of opening up your ideas to what could possibly be done and what would you like to do. Now, to some of you, those 4 days that you get off, subject to your work, are vital. They're like an opportunity. And whilst others see it as Christmas, others can see it as time off, as 4 days of holiday. And so you might actually want to go even further with your ideas and not just think about a moment where you spend it on your own, but instead you actually go and have an adventure. You go and explore, and you go and spend it somewhere different. Whether you spend it with friends, if they don't mind you coming along. Sometimes one extra single person isn't that major, in the sense of if they're cooking for 6, 7 isn't too bad. Whereas if you had a family or even another partner, going from 6 to 8 can be a bit like, okay. But if you were going from 6 to 10 because you ended up having children too, then potentially that's more of a tricky scenario. And I know some of you listening will have children, so there's always that element to consider. And I have a little bit of assumptive there, that, or presumptive at least, that you don't have children. But it's that idea that maybe there are some friends you can spend it with, or you want to go away and explore on your own. It's an opportunity to do like a pretend 4-day retreat. I don't know off the top of my head of any places that are necessarily running retreats over Christmas Day, but it could be that you decide to just go and quit that excitement, that buzz, and you just want some time to relax because it's 4 days off. Now, the other thing that springs to mind that you might want to do over your own time with family might be spending time helping out and giving back to charity. I don't know if it's running this year, but in previous years I've done Crisis at Christmas. I haven't done Christmas Day, and I think Christmas Day is actually one of the most popular days to do it. They usually need help on all the other days. I think it's about a 10-day period where at different crisis centres that they put up for Christmas, you get those that don't have homes or access to clothing, cleaning, haircuts or anything like that, and they put on food, entertainment and helping them essentially to get ready. So they'll find clothes that are given through donations, they'll do haircuts. I think they might even do some health checks for them too, off the top of my mind. But it's that idea of giving back as well. I think there can be something, when you think about the ways to make new friends element that I've spoken about in previous episodes and the way to make the most of single life, this Christmas time could potentially be an opportunity because food banks, whether it's crisis or otherwise, need that help. And there's going to be other things such as, I believe there are some causes that go towards loneliness within the elderly, so that you might go round and deliver a dinner and spend some time there. I could be wrong, but it's worth exploring that if that's something that appeals to you. So there's exploration, there's giving back, and then there's doing it a little bit differently. Now that's all very centered on Christmas Day, but as December looms, we can find it builds and builds this high kind of expectation of what am I going to do? Why am I on my own? And the feeling just gets bigger and bigger. It doesn't feel like it goes away. And so another element to managing Christmas is to put a little bit of focus on yourself and make Christmas about you. So initially I was talking about it's your Christmas too, make it the way you want. But now it's look at it for you and what you want to do and put the focus on you. Do some things that are Christmassy, but do them alone if you want. So go and make those Christmas cookies or a Christmas pudding or Christmas cake, whatever those are made up of. And try and embrace it and do things for you and have that self-care. So within the Single Girls Club in December, I'm going to be running an advent calendar for different Christmassy activities that encourage you to make the most of the Christmas period and put a little bit of focus on you so that you don't forget yourself within this. It'll be little activities, little things to do to remind yourself of your worth and making sure that you don't forget that you're a wonderful person regardless of your relationship status over Christmas. Like, it is not the be all and end all, and we need to make sure that we have things in place. So alongside your chocolate advent calendar or alongside your beauty one, if that's what you've got, then I'm also going to be running that in the Single Girls Club. So if you want to be involved with that, make sure you're in the Single Girls Club according to the email list, and you'll be able to get those each day that comes up. And within that, you'll be then surrounded hopefully by other people that are doing it too. And it will generate that conversation about how you're feeling and how you're coping and how you're managing. And so the focus isn't just on you, but also that community of realizing that you aren't the only one that feels this way. Because that's where the loneliness comes from. The loneliness can come from feeling that we are alone and that no one else feels like this. Once we hear stories of how alone other people feel, and we also hear of how they've recovered from that loneliness, that's when we feel like it's possible. Joining a community, encouraging yourself to do something for you, and even if you don't get involved with every single event or little activity, just doing it here and there for the ones that fit in and suit and that you fancy, just give you that little edge of, I have given myself time today. I have prioritized me. And I'm not sitting there comparing myself to all the things I'm seeing on Instagram, all those couples, all those dinners. I am focusing on myself and all the wonderful things about me. And so that brings me on to my next point. As well as focusing on you and the idea of that community, I think it's important to try and spend time with anyone that you want to spend time with. So for some, it really will be family. As mentioned, the polls showed on the Instagram story that family was key to a lot of people's, but some people didn't want to, they'd actually chosen not to, or it just isn't practical. Maybe it's just not the place that they feel most comfortable. But if you want to spend it somewhere different with someone else, and there's an opportunity to, then go for it. And if that opportunity hasn't been put in front of you yet, then ask. People may have already made their plans for Christmas, or it might be like a written rule for them that they always go to their mums, or whatever it might be. Like, you aren't going to shift them on that. But there's every possibility that if you put yourself out there and just say, hey, would you be around sometime over Christmas to go for a walk? Would you be around at Christmas to go out to the cafe on this day? You're asking. And your friend might say no if it's a friend that you're asked. But at the same time, if they say no, they say no. You haven't lost anything. But if they say yes, then great. Or if they say, I can't do that day, but we could do then. People don't know what you want unless you tell them. Sometimes we can make the mistake that we think other people know what we want, because that's of course what I want. Of course I don't want to be on my own for Christmas. Of course I'd rather be doing something than being with my family. So why haven't you invited me? That could be the kind of thing that might even come up in your head. But people are not mind readers. This applies in lots of contexts in life. Like, relationships is big for this kind of concept. You have to communicate to someone if you want to spend time with them. And in a relationship, we usually expect people to know what we want, when in actual fact, we have to tell them. It is nicer if they can work it out for themselves and just do it without being asked. But sometimes we have to be explicit. We sort of have to half invite ourselves. I don't think I'd go as far as saying, can I come to yours for Christmas? Would I? I mean, what's the harm in it? If you know that they are an open family, and it's your friend that's cooking, it's not their family, unless you're very close to their family, then why wouldn't you? If you just, the worst they can say is no. And what's that no going to do? Not change your position. So even if it was for Christmas dinner, I've not really reflected on that before, but there's a potential there that if you don't ask, you don't get in life. And a no, being comfortable with getting a no needs to be something we get better at. We need to be resilient to rejection. And it's not rejection. Sometimes people just have other plans, or they hadn't accounted for that and they hadn't really thought about it. So never take that no personally, especially at Christmas. It's such a personal time. But if you did want to float an idea for meeting up, going out, doing something, or potentially even spending some of Christmas Day together, hey, you go on that walk with your family, would you mind if I joined? For the families that are inclusive and that you probably want to be around, they'll probably just say yes. And if they say no, then you'll go, no worries, I'll find someone else to go on a walk with. And at the end of the day, you can go on a walk on your own. There's no harm with that. But try to spend it with the people you want to spend it with. And if it means splitting time up, then do so. If it means spending a little bit less time with family than you would normally, then go for it. In last week's episode on saying no, it kind of goes into the idea of why we find it difficult to say no. And it might not even be a request, but when things are tradition, it can feel hard because you're going to have to bring it up to say no in the first place. And it might already feel like it's presumed you're going to do something. I know myself and my brother have found this frustrating at times when we don't feel like we've been asked, or that it wasn't considered that we might want to do something different. And so we've had to develop ways of bringing it up or saying it or making our decisions and then just saying that's what I'm doing. But it's all a little bit of practice. And so I wouldn't necessarily do all of these things all at once unless you're feeling confident. Go for it if you are. And maybe start with the small one, and you get a yes, makes you more confident to do the next. We actually gain confidence by doing. It's one of my biggest messages. You get confident by trying it and doing it. You don't often jump in at the biggest deep end. Or it can be, if it doesn't go well, then that can be detrimental to you continuing. It can demotivate you. But if you start little by little with this idea about what you really want to do for Christmas, then you build it up. And if you don't get everything done this year, then you can get it done next year. It's fine. And I just want to end and summarize on the fact that no matter what your relationship status, whether that's at Christmas or at any other time in the year, you are all you need. I completely understand, and I talk about it enough, that we need friends, we need support, we need networks. It's within our hardwiring that we need companionship in order to survive. We need that tribe. But in terms of getting through Christmas, you are all you need. You need to be your biggest supporter. You need to remember the best bits about you and embrace some of the not so good bits about you, because we've all got them and we've all got different preferences to what's best or what's not. But throughout this Christmas period, make sure you've got your list. And if you don't know what I mean by your list is the list of the things that you've done that you are most proud of, for the qualities that you have that you're most proud of, and for all the things that you've overcome, that you feel you've learnt from, have developed strength and growth. You need that list to be able to acknowledge at any time during Christmas, to give yourself the reminder of all the things you've done and are most proud of. Because when things get on top of us, and then when we do something wrong, we can feel like we're not worthy. Why do we always make that mistake? That we're a donut, that we're not as good at something as we should be by now, that we're not successful. When in actual fact, there's always something that all of you have done and probably a number of them that are worth remembering, but they always seem a bit harder to remember when like life's getting you down, or you're getting frustrated about all these couples that are everywhere at Christmas, or that person hasn't taken a no very well. You've got to cope with that. So make sure you've got your list. Remember that Christmas is about you as much as it is about everyone else. So if you want to try some things differently, then do it. Prioritize the time for the things that you want to do and who you want to see. And put yourself out there a little bit and ask if it's not completely obvious that that's what you want to do. Yes, there's lots of couples around. Yes, people are going to ask you about your love life. Flip the conversations. Remember that there is a lot to being in a couple at Christmas, such as having to deal with another family and run around like a headless chicken across the country to get to different places. But enjoy this Christmas time for whatever you want to make it. If you want to spend it alone, spend it alone. If you want to see your family, if you want to go to a friend's, ask, see if it's possible. Go and explore, go and do something different and just mix it up a little bit and give yourself something exciting to look forward to at Christmas. And lastly, make sure you've bought yourself a present. And I mean a proper present that you wrap up and unwrap. Not just like something that you bought. I'd do it as early as possible so you almost forget about it. In fact, give it to whoever you're going to spend Christmas Day with. Give it to them, wrap it up, and get them to give it back to you. What an idea. What an idea for remembering that you're giving yourself that gift. And it's all part of it. Give yourself the gift of enjoying Christmas, of making the most of it, no matter what your scenario, and literally a physical Christmas gift as well. I hope that gives you some guidance in terms of how to spend Christmas. Get involved with the Single Girls Club. Make sure that you're there for that advent calendar at the start of December so that you can make the most of Christmas and do a build up for you that is exciting and doesn't require anybody else to be around. Until next time, everybody, keep thriving.